In this video, I'd like to talk to you about how do you select the right pruning technique for your particular clematis. Then I'll go and show you how I prune my clematis in the garden. At the end of the video, I'll give you some secrets that I use for making it easier for clematis to climb up structures. In order to prune clematis, you have to know which type you have. If you know the name of the clematis, you can look it up on the internet and find out what type of pruning it needs. If you don't have the name, so you've moved into a new house and there's some clematis there and you have no idea what it is, or you bought them and didn't keep the name, then you have to do a little more work. What you really have to do is let them grow for a year and watch the flowers. And if I have a clematis like that and it's the first year I have it in the garden, I won't prune it at all. Just leave it alone and see what it does. If it flowers very quickly, it's a type 1 clematis. And it blooms very quickly and very early in the spring, which means you shouldn't prune it at all this time of the year. There are some other clematis that bloom sort of late spring, early summer, and they also bloom on last year's wood. So you don't want to prune them at this time of year either. You want to leave those, but you might cut them back to a height that is more suitable. And then there's a third type of clematis, which is the type that most people have. So if you're guessing and you want to do some pruning, you have no idea what type it is, it's probably a type 3. And those clematis we prune right to the ground. They bloom on new wood. They're going to start to grow in the spring and make new leaves and stems, and then sometime in midsummer they'll bloom. So in the spring I take out my list of clematis and I know which one is growing at each spot here, and I decide what to do. This here is one of my favorite clematis. It's not very common in gardens, but it's one that a lot more people should be growing. It's called Clematis alpina. It's very hardy. I think it's hardy to zone 3. It blooms really early in the year, so all the buds are already on the plant. If I prune this back, I won't get any flowering. So you have to leave all the buds. I just leave it the way it is. Now if it gets too tall, you can cut it back a little bit, but I just leave the whole thing, and the pruning's already done. It's a great plant for the garden, and it's also a great plant for a container. In a container it stays a little smaller and blooms really nicely early in the year. This first one here is a clematis called Guernsey queen, and it blooms on old wood. So the buds are already on that clematis, and I don't want to cut it off. Unfortunately here the rabbits sometimes disagree, and during the winter they go ahead and prune it anyways. So this is a pretty young plant. It's only been in the ground a couple years. It has about a foot of growth, and it will bloom a bit. I really would prefer that I have stems that are about my height so that the blooms are at this height when it blooms. Okay? In this case, because it's so low, the blooms will be right down on the ground. This is another great clematis called Miss Harvey. I've got each one named so I know what they are. And it's a type 3 clematis, so it's going to bloom in late summer on new wood. Well, since it blooms on new wood, all this old stuff is not of much use, and it grows about 10 feet tall every year. So I just cut it right back. You can see there's about 4 or 5 inches of stubble left, and so I just come and just cut it right off with some pruners. This is a clematis I've had for many years, and I've lost the name of it, but I do know it's a type 3 clematis. It blooms quite late in the season and makes small purple flowers about this big. As long as I know the type of clematis it is, I know how to prune it. This thing needs to be cut right back to the ground, and it will flower on new wood. So I'll go ahead and show you how I do that. So step 1 is to cut it back. I could cut it very carefully right above a bud, but there are so many stems in here, and they're quite brittle this time of the year. I don't think that's really necessary. I just grab a handful and cut it. So we've got about 8 inches of growth, lots of buds along here. It will also sprout from underground. So we've got lots of new growth coming. The next step is to get rid of all this upper growth. I train my clematis on vertical wires, so I want to be careful I don't cut those. But I just pull it off, and whenever it gets stuck too much, I just give it a cut and pull some more until it's all off. It's not a very organized process. You just keep working at it until you get it all off the arbor. There we go. Now you don't have to get every last piece off. These things are dry and they're brittle, and in another couple of weeks the wind will blow them off anyways. Pruning clematis is really easy. Make sure you know what type you have, and then you know exactly how to prune it. Each plant only takes a couple seconds and you're done. I'd like to add one more important thing to this video. I'd like to talk about building something for them to climb up. Clematis wrap around things with their leaf petioles. So you have the leaf here and a very short petiole, and it wraps around. It needs something thin to wrap around or it doesn't climb very well. A lot of people use lattice for clematis to climb up, but that piece of lattice is just too thick for the leaves to get around, so they never climb up and you have to use string to tie them on. It doesn't really make a lot of sense. Almost everywhere where I have clematis, I use wires. These are thin wires. The leaves have no problem wrapping around them. I put the wires in vertically because, hey, clematis grow vertically. I've seen other people put wires across their arbors. One here, another one here. Well, that doesn't really work because vines then grow up to that wire and go across instead of up, and we want to get height into them. So the best solution I found is simple wires. Don't worry about them getting too hot in the summer. That doesn't seem to bother the clematis at all. I hope you enjoyed this video, and now you know how to prune clematis.